Hey guys, welcome back to FKC's Knitting Bootcamp. Today's the video where we start our project. I know you're all excited. You've been practicing your casting on and your knitting and your purling and your knitting two together and your yarn overing and you're ready to go. I have a few last minute tips to help you on the way. Alright, so the instructions in the pattern that I linked up actually have an error, and if you've read through the pattern you'll have already read it, but it might not have made any sense to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through that pattern line by line, and I'm also going to write it out for you so you have something to come back to and check on as you get going. We are going to start by casting on 210 stitches, your slip knot plus 209. You're going to keep track of how many stitches you've cast on. This is just my first tip today, by placing a stitch marker every time you cast on 25 stitches. How do I know that there's nothing more frustrating than miscounting or losing your count when you're casting on a whole whack of stitches? It's happened to me many times. So I put a stitch marker every 25 stitches all the way around till I get to my 200 or 210 in this case. We'll take them out on the second row, they don't really matter. After you've got 210 stitches, I want you to cast on one extra stitch. All right, we're going to get rid of that stitch when we join to knit in the round. Now, normally what you've been doing is you've been turning your needles so that you're looking at the back side of your work and your working yarn is on the right side again, and you've been purling back or knitting back, depending on whether we've been doing stocking stitch or we've been doing the garter stitch swatch. So today what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to take that long needle full of stitches and join it into a circle. A couple of things you're going to have to watch out for. One is that you don't twist the stitches on the needles. So ideally you're going to lay those needles out flat, and you're going to make sure that there hasn't been any corkscrewing as you moved down the needle. You'll be able to tell because all the stitches will be lined up along your needle, and then you'll see the little cast on edge at the same side along the bottom ideally, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to then take your needles, you're going to make a circle with them so that the last stitch you cast on is at the tip of your right hand needle and your working yarn is there. You're going to cast on that. You've got that extra 211th stitch, right? You're immediately going to slip it over to the left needle without knitting. You're going to put a stitch marker, different color than the ones that you've used, or something that's going to let you know this is the start of your round, on the right needle, and you're going to knit the first two stitches off the left needle together. So we'll have gotten rid of that extra stitch that we cast on. Why do we do that? It's going to give you a much cleaner join. You won't have a big gap between the first stitch and the last stitch on the needle when you join in the round. So knit those two together, pull tightly on your working yarn, and guess what you get to do? You get to knit all the way around until you get back to your marker. Now, instead of turning the work like we did on straight needles or on your circulars when we were pretending they were straight needles, we're just going to slip that stitch marker back over to the right needle, and we're going to keep moving around. So all we're doing is knitting in a circle, around and around and around and around. The front of the work will always be facing you, and this pattern has a start with 4 rows of garter stitch. So when you're doing garter stitch in the round, since the front is always facing you, the front of your knitting, what you're going to do is knit a row, then purl a row, knit another row, then purl another row. The pattern has asked you to do 4 rows of garter stitch, so knit 1, purl 1, knit 1 row, purl 1 row. I actually added 2 more to my sample, and that's because I didn't like the look of the narrow band, but also because several people who've knit this pattern have said that if you don't put a couple of extra rows of garter stitch in there, you might find that the edge of your cowl curls just a bit. You might not care about that, and it'll depend a little bit on how tightly you cast on and how tightly you knit. So I did 6 rows of garter stitch before I moved on to the next set of instructions, which was creating the eyelet holes. Now the pattern has an error. It gives you 2 rows, row 1 and 2 for the eyelet section. In fact, you only need to use one of those rows. Okay, I chose the row that asked you to knit 2 together, yarn over, because I like to start with a knit 2 together. what I did was all the way around, I knit 2 stitches together, decreasing a stitch. I passed my yarn around to make that stitch up. Knit 2 stitches together, yarn over. Knit 2 stitches together, yarn over. And here are your specific instructions. If you're knitting the long double looped cowl, you'll be using a long 80 centimeter needle. If you're knitting the short single loop, you'll be knitting with a 40 centimeter needle. Cast on either 210 or 110 stitches, depending on the side, plus that 1 extra stitch. Join in the round, slipping that first stitch over to the left needle, placing a marker, knitting the first 2 stitches together. Knit for 4 or 6 rounds like I did of garter stitch, knitting first round, purling second round, etc. Then you're into your eyelet section. You can either go 1, 3, or 5 eyelet rows, knitting 2 together, yarn over all the way around. You're going to knit 5 rounds of stocking stitch, knitting every row, that's easy. Purl 1 round. Knit 5 more rounds of stocking stitch, then repeat steps 4 to 7 and repeat step 4 once more. Knit 4 or 6 rounds of garter stitch and bind off all stitches loosely. I will give you instructions for that later. Have fun!